Hey everyone, James from TeaDB bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today it's going to be a non-drinking Inbetweenisode. Going to be talking about a little bit more categorization of raw puer. Last time I did an episode sort of like this. I think it was titled the 5 different categories of raw puer that you should try, and just talking a little bit about the diversity of just the general category of raw puer. It's a very diverse sort of tea. You can get a ton of different profiles from it, especially when looking at it as a very big category. And so I talked about the 5 sort of subcategories that I thought people should seek out and try. Of course, you can subdivide these things a lot of different ways. But for my own purposes, actually, I think about these categories and stuff a little more specifically when it comes to my own drinking. And those of you that have sort of followed my drinking over the years, or a TeaDB blog over the years, I have something like a drinking log, which is basically what I record and pay attention to as far as things that I just choose to drink when I'm not sampling or and I'm basically left to choose what I'm drinking on my own. On my own accord. As is a surprise to no one, I am primarily a raw puer drinker. I drink about somewhere between 60 to 70% of those sessions on my own. I choose to drink raw puer. The rest of that is basically some form of oolong, so wui tea, Taiwanese oolong, yancha, aged, I think I ought to have said wui, as well as aged oolong. So I will also dabble in those different categories, but the majority of what I do drink is some sort of raw puer, almost all of it falling into the semi-aged category. So yeah, let's quickly walk through those 5 categories that I talked about in the previous episode, and I'll say why or why not I am drinking it. So the first one was young raw puer. Category I think is well worth trying. You can find probably 1,000 different examples these days from very easily from modern sort of boutique operations of raw puer. Why do I not drink it? Well, mostly it's because I just don't want to drink it. I don't particularly enjoy young raw puer. I'm not someone that really enjoys it like a green tea, and I just don't enjoy it as much as I do other categories. So it really does fail at that speed test, and that's something I really realized quite quickly when I started to track that drinking log. And it did really inform a lot of the direction of TeaDB and stuff I was trying to do, just because, I don't know, you don't want to put yourself sampling 25 different things, Linchong teas or even Munghai area teas, when you're just not going to drink those. And would your tea diet be served better by just trying other stuff? And for me, I think the answer is clearly yes. And I also do find the value of most young raw puer to be a little bit dubious compared to more semi-aged options. I'm sure vendors especially would dispute this, but my preference certainly on value front and choosing something to drink would lie into more older teas. Okay, so semi-aged tea that has been more dry stored. Again, this is a category I maybe drink very slightly more than young tea, but frankly, I just don't. It's not a category of tea that I particularly enjoy or seek out either. For me, I generally prefer tea with a little bit of humidity towards it. So even if it's sort of like dry Taiwan or dry Guangzhou, which I definitely do enjoy those sorts of storage. But straight Kunming, stuff like that, I almost never drink Kunming stored teas. You could call it a preference thing. That's something that I would be very comfortable with calling that just sort of preference. I just do not like that greener nature. And that lines up pretty closely with some of my reasons for just not wanting to drink young tea as well. Okay, so semi-aged factory tea that's been more humidly stored. So we're talking you're at Taiwan, you're Guangzhou, you're in Malaysia. Drink plenty of this. I drink quite a bit of this. It's definitely one of the main subcategories of raw puer that I am drinking from. Mainly in that kind of like 2004 to 2008 or 9 range. So really mid 2000s. And part of this is because the teas before that are very, very expensive. And the teas later, while they're cheaper, they aren't as aged. So for me, hitting that sort of sweet spot of value, but also a significant amount of age, it's just really been kind of the sweet spot for me as far as like semi-aged factory teas. Mostly a lot of Munghai as well as Shaguan. I generally think I prefer Munghai as a brand, but I also do enjoy some Shaguan teas as well as some just sort of random hodgepodge teas there as well. And let's see, semi-aged boutique. It's another category that I do drink from fairly often. Usually, probably the one that's been the most successful over the years, and probably not the only one I'd recommend, but definitely one that has sort of played the circuit, is Yangqing Hao. I've covered those teas to death on videos and stuff like that. So if you are interested in that brand, you can certainly hear more from watching more videos. And traditionally stored tea is the last category. So I do drink this, not as much as semi-aged factory and semi-aged boutique, but it is definitely a category of tea that I am drinking somewhat regularly. For me, this has sort of fit into a different niche than I originally would have imagined like 5 or 6 years ago. Mainly because I have ended up drinking a lot more ripe than I intended to, just because it's my morning brew with my wife. And so traditionally stored teas kind of can fit in as sort of a alternate in that category. Generally, I don't brew them as often because the ones that have been at least available to me as far as like traditionally stored raw puer tend to be a little bit more expensive, so 25 cents a gram, 30 cents a gram, that sort of thing, whereas you can get ripe for 10 cents a gram. So it's mainly a cost reason, I guess, why that doesn't fit into sort of more prominent drinking for me. Okay, so how do I sort of subdivide the tea that I actually am drinking? So I do keep fairly diligent spreadsheets and stuff like that, and I have ways of just sort of categorizing it and stuff. One of the ways, of course, is should be pretty obvious. It's boutique versus not boutique. I think there's a pretty significant difference in the profile you'd expect between those two sort of subcategories of tea. So I'll classify something as sort of factory or not. There's some teas, of course, that sort of straddle that line and don't necessarily comfortably fit into that. For instance, something like the Bai Cha Tong 2003, probably more of a factory than not. I've featured that tea maybe a year ago on TeaDB, but you could make the case that it's definitely pretty different than Munghai and Shaguan. And the other way I categorize tea is sort of by region. For me, internally in my head, and this is definitely not sort of the geographically most equal way to do it, but for me, I generally drink most teas from Xishuangbanna, which contains both Munghai and Yiwu. So I will generally separate teas into sort of Eastern Xishuangbanna, which would be more Yiwu teas, Six Famous Mountain, that sort of thing. So your Yolas, your Yiwus, your Guafeng Jais, stuff like that. So that would be a lot of like Yangqing Hao and stuff. So a lot of boutique teas in particular come from there. And on the western side, you have a lot of both boutique, but also a fair amount of factory tea, specifically Munghai Tea Factory. So even something like the Love Forever Paper Tong, I tend to think of that as a Munghai factory blend, Munghai the area as opposed to the factory, because I think it has more of those characteristics to it than others. And then from there, maybe people that probably like tea north of Xishuangbanna would probably really hate this, but I tend to categorize everything else north of there as more northern. So Shaguan stuff gets piled in there just because I suspect that it has a lot of more northern material and things like that. So there is northern tea, and then there's Munghai tea, and then there's kind of greater Yiwu, Mangala County sort of tea that I place over on the sides. And so that's sort of how I just sort of subdivide the regions of Pu'erh there. And yeah, so it's pretty simple as far as that goes, and so it's really just kind of based off of factory or not, and then which area you're from. And everyone just has different ways of simplifying it. For me, I think this makes the most sense because trying to, you want to represent the different profiles and stuff like that in your that you are actually drinking. Okay, well, I think that just about concludes this Inbetweenisode. Hopefully it wasn't too much of just like navel gazing at how I did it. I know that the category episode I had done a few months back was quite popular, so I wanted to sort of do a follow-up, and this is, you know, a little bit off tangent of that, but hopefully not too much that people don't have something to enjoy. So let me know how you think about your own sort of drinking. Do you think about stuff just sort of in terms of boutique versus factory? Do you sort of subdivide in your head as far as regions go and that sort of thing? Let me know. Comment below and let me know how you are thinking about the actual your collection or stash of raw puer and what you are sampling or trying. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll see you all next time.